Hi everybody, welcome once again, and in today's video I am going to explain you Chamberlin's concept of group equilibrium. By group, Chamberlin means producers, those who are producing close substitutes, though the products are not identical but they are close substitutes of each other. Since these producers are competing with each other in the market, the demand for the product of one producer is significantly affected by the price and the nature of the product of its rival. Due to product differentiation, there is large variation in the demand and cost curves of the firm. Therefore, to simplify the analysis, Chamberlin has assumed that all firms have identical demand and cost curves. In order to explain the concept of group equilibrium, Chamberlin has developed three distinct models of equilibrium. In the first model, equilibrium with new firms entering the industry, the existing firms are already earning supernormal profits, so they do not have any incentive to change the price. But long run equilibrium is established with new entrants when they enter the industry because of the supernormal profits. The initial equilibrium is at a point where marginal revenue and marginal cost curves are equal to each other. And here is the price. At this price, the firms are earning supernormal profits, and attracted by the supernormal profit, new firms will be entering the industry. But as soon as the new firms will be entering the industry, this demand curve D1 will shift leftwards, because the total market demand will now be shared by more number of firms. So as a result, there will be a leftward shift in demand curve from D1 to D2. The corresponding marginal revenue curve for D2 demand curve is MR2. The equilibrium will now be established here where the marginal revenue curve is equal to marginal cost. So the new quantity is Q2 with the price of P2, and at this point average cost curve is tangent to demand curve D2. So this will be the long run equilibrium point for the firm. This point E will be the long run equilibrium point. In the second model, the number of firms in the industry is optimal, that is, there is no entry and exit, and long run equilibrium takes place through price competition in the existing firms. Here Chamberlin has introduced the concept of perceived and proportional demand curve. Perceived demand curve describes the demand for the product of one firm on the assumption that all other firms in the industry or group keeps the price of their products constant. The individual firm thinks that in case it changes the price of its product, its competitors will not react. Here I have drawn perceived demand curve D and proportional demand curve as this red curve. Proportional demand curve shows the demand or sales of the product of one firm when the prices of all firms in a product group or industry changes. So basically here, as we can see, that the proportional demand curve is less elastic as compared to perceived demand curve. At a price P where both these curves intersect, the quantity is Q. But let's say that the price changes. In this case, the change in quantity as perceived by the firm will be much greater than what we can see on the proportional demand curve, because the firm, in case of perceived demand curve, the firm is basically behaving in a manner where it thinks that its competitors will not react in any case. It reduces the price of the product and it can increase its sales by reducing the price. But in the industry, when a firm reduces its price, other firms also behave in the same manner. Though that is not this type of reaction on the part of the firms is not deliberate, but all the firms think that their competitors will not change the price if the given firm changes the price of their product, and all of them behave in the same manner. As a result, the increase in the sales of the product is much less than what it actually perceives. Proportional demand curve shows the change in the demand or sales of the firm when all other firms in the group changes the price of their product simultaneously in the same direction and by the same amount, so that all of them charges the uniform price. Since all the firms share the market equally, the greater the number of firms in the product group, the smaller the share of each firm in the total market demand at a given price. Proportional demand curve is comparatively less elastic as compared to perceived demand curve because the same change in price by all the firms in the industry will prevent the movement of customers from one firm to another. In this model, it is assumed that the number of firms in the industry is such that it is compatible with the long run equilibrium, that is, neither entry of new firms takes place nor exit, but the existing price is greater than the equilibrium price. And at this price P1, as we can see on the perceived demand curve D1, the firm is selling Q1 units of output. Let's assume that the firm is initially operating at non-equilibrium price, producing a quantity of Q naught, and the firm decides to reduce the price of the product in order to increase its sales. So the firm reduces the price to P1 in order to achieve a sales of Q1, but that won't happen. Instead, the demand curve of the firm will shift leftwards, perceived demand curve of the firm, because the firm believes that the price of its competitors will remain same, but all other firms in the group will behave in the similar manner, and as a result the demand curve shifts to D1. So at this price P1, the firm's sales increases to Q2 and not to Q1. The firm further decides to reduce its price to P2 to achieve a target of Q1, but instead the firm is able to achieve only Q3 quantity by reducing the price to P2 as determined by the proportionate demand curve of the firm. The firm will continue to behave in the similar manner and will decide to further reduce the price of the product in order to achieve a target of Q1. As a result, the demand or the perceived demand of the firm will fall further to D3. Let's draw the corresponding marginal revenue of the firm here in order to determine the equilibrium of the firm. The long run average cost curve of the firm is tangent to the perceived demand curve, and the perceived demand curve at this point of tangency, the perceived demand curve cuts a proportional demand curve. At this point, the equilibrium of the firm is established. We can mark it as point E, and marginal revenue and marginal cost intersect each other. So at this point E, the equilibrium of the firm is established at a price PE. So in order for the firm to be in equilibrium in long run, the following conditions needs to be satisfied. Marginal revenue should be equal to marginal cost. Perceived demand curve should be tangent to the long run average cost curve, and at the point of tangency, perceived demand curve cuts the proportional demand curve. I hope these two concepts are clear to you. We'll be explaining Chamberlin's third model in the next video. Thank you and have a nice day.